Thank you, Zach, and welcome everyone. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm on the East Coast, so it's evening, but I'm not sure if it's afternoon for some of you. And I want to compliment Passive House Accelerator for the great tour that we did earlier this year. And Zach, I saw a YouTube video of your interview with Brad Mahoney. So I encourage everyone who wants to learn a little bit more about Winthrop Center to feel free to check that out. And I'd also point you to our website, www.winthropcenter.com, for even further and additional information. So with no further ado, Zach, I'm going to use my screen because I slightly updated the presentation from what I sent to Kim.
That's perfect.
There we go. So as Zach mentioned, Winthrop Center is in the heart of downtown Boston. And it's been developed by Millennium Partners. We are a US development company, and we have developed mixed use projects throughout the United States. We have not done anything international. Our product has been primarily luxury residential, often coupled with a major hotel brand. In the Boston area, because we as the local partner had office experience, we also did quite a bit of office work as well as historic preservation. It's kind of hard to develop in Boston without doing some type of historic preservation. So being very, very familiar with Boston, when an RFP came out for a site in the financial district that was a 4-story parking garage owned by the city of Boston, but in real disrepair. And matter of fact, it had been closed because it was structurally unsound. We competed for that development. And I think part of that competition led us to go beyond and really try to do something that would excite the city. We were working with Handel Architects, as well as, at the time it was Vidaris, today it's their Socotec, and Stephen Winters. I will credit that team with suggesting the Passive House idea for Boston. They had just completed a project in Roosevelt Island for Cornell University, and they had done that successfully. Now that was a dormitory, so we were still looking at a very challenging project when we decided to do a project of this magnitude and make it Passive House. But it was a differentiator. And when you are competing for a site, you need to think beyond and you need to create these differentiators. So that was part of our motivation. And as we go through, I'll talk to you about how that decision really stood the test of time and has proven to be even a stronger decision than just to win the site. The site is located smack in the middle of downtown. Anyone who's familiar with Boston, Logan Airport is very close to the center city. You go through one of the tunnels and you're right in the financial district. South Station, which is a major rail line, and North Station both feed the city. And all of Boston's MBTA transits get you to within walking distance easily of Winthrop Center. So it became very obvious that this was a great place for a mixed use development. We decided to make the lower portion of the building office, partly because the views are somewhat compromised. And then the very top of the building was residential. Knowing that doing Passive House would be a challenge to exploit these views for the condominiums, we decided to focus the office portion on the Passive House criteria. It's 812,000 square feet, so it's still a very large commitment. Below the office, there is some amenity space, including what we call a connector, which is a public space. Those spaces are also not included in the Passive House. So one of the challenges was to convince Passive House International that they could look at a mixed use project in segments. It didn't have to be the whole building, that they could look at it as just the office portion and work with us to qualify that as a passive house. We came to terms with them as a quote pilot project, but they as the process has gone on and we've started to actually do testing and prove to ourselves, we all have realized that this model does work and it works quite well. And sometimes it's the only choice you have based on a lot of competing interest. And we'll get to a little bit more why I say it that way. But when the building is complete, this is the office piece, right? From the top of this public connector area, right up to what is where the residential terraces are. We're fortunate because we have a structural transition here. So we have a 4-foot concrete mat slab way up in the air. And that helps us isolate the building between residential and office. So we could conduct a lot of the testing in this portion of the building while this portion is still being built. On the ground floor, and I'm going to just give you a little bit of backdrop as to what else the project is all about, because it isn't really just one item that made Winthrop Center so exciting. It's the way we took all of these ideas and mixed them together, and they all somewhat rely on each other. So one of the requirements of the city RFP was to have public space. This connector will serve as our we call it a POP, privately owned public space. There's the office component and the residential lobbies, both separate and private. As you might expect, we would need to do that even just for security. There's a park that will be owned by the city, but needs to be constructed and maintained by us as the developer. So as we got into, what are the attributes of Winthrop Center, in addition to being a passive house, we realized that we were really 99% of the way there for a well building. So we are going to be the first well office building in Boston to be gold certified. And passive house, by its nature, tends to make healthier buildings because of the thermal comfort requirements and because of all the additional fresh air that's required. And as you know, fresh air was kind of a ho-hum for us on the sales side until COVID struck. And then all of a sudden, everybody wanted to understand what fresh air was all about and were asking questions. So we actually fared pretty well through COVID, and many, many people have been better educated as a result of that pandemic. That public space that I mentioned, as you can see, is meant to be very dynamic, very interactive. There'll be programs here. There are conference pods, we call them pods, that overhang the public space. And we have an agreement that these spaces can be used by nonprofits. So the idea is to find a space where all of Boston can connect. We will program different types of events in this space. There is food and beverage available, both on the mezzanine level and the ground floor. The office is here. Below grade, there is parking. The majority of that parking is stackers. And this defines the bottom of our passive house office space. So there was, I won't say an easy way to differentiate, but there was a way for us to differentiate, to be able to test the passive house components within the mixed use building. From the park looking back, again, you can kind of see where the passive house is defined. In other words, this glazing is kind of stick-built curtain wall. This is your triple glazed passive house wall. We also, being well and wanting to adhere to attracting tenants who are interested in, fresh air and all the attributes of well, we had a patio. So that was a challenge from passive house, just to be able to get the balcony doors to work and to make sure that, that was a helpful thing. In the building, there are amenities for the tenants. That's kind of a requirement. We were heading that way even before COVID. Now, as a plea to get employees to come back to work, most tenants want to see some great meeting spaces, spaces where their employees can enjoy such amenities as a sports simulator, a gym, a coffee bar and a lounge. And this also served as a way for tenants to have swing space. One of the things we noticed in marketing the office space is a lot of tenants really don't know how much space they're going to need. They're still developing their new work models. So this allowed them, if they didn't build enough conference spaces, okay, there's conference spaces here, there's meeting rooms, and these spaces can be reserved for individual tenants. So this gave them that flexibility as they made their decision to rent space. We also found that tenants who were in the market and had to make a decision about, am I going to rent more office space? Am I going to move? A lot of tenants wanted to upgrade to a building that is, you know, married their values. And that was one thing we learned, that Passive House, you know, you go on a lot of folks' websites and you see that they talk about climate change. And so we challenge them to put their money where their mouth is. Why would they not be in a building that promotes climate change if that's part of their values? Again, this is the coffee bar and the after work you can gather. It's also that human connection that I think people realized they needed, having gone through the pandemic. And the learning area and the learning steps, co-working area, again, all kind of, you know, an important component of how we're going to work together in the future, how we want these collaborative spaces, how we may not want to just go 9 to 5 in our own office, but be able to mingle with other workers in the same building. Fitness center. And a typical office is, the layout is 38,000 square feet. So that's not easily available in the city of Boston. A lot of the, even the Class A that's available is more in the 20 to 22,000 square foot floor plate. So the 38,000 allows for tenants to get on one floor if that's what they're interested in doing. And we had originally designed the building for benching and cramming a lot of people in. That isn't the way architects are designing anymore. So the Winthrop Center allows for a lot of what they call neighborhoods and collaboration spaces. So we were able to pivot with this building once we figured out what the market was asking for. Traditional Class A, you kind of saw these type of windows. A lot of people, when they talked about Passive House, were very concerned that we wouldn't be able to take advantage of extra glazing. But in fact, at Winthrop Center, this is what we have. So we have maximized the glass where we can. And there are areas where we don't have views, and that's where we went with solid panel walls. We do, all of this glass is triple glazed. And then we actually have an additional wall that you build on top of the curtain wall. So one thing I say to tenants is the landlord has done all of this very hardy exterior wall, and you, tenant, will benefit from both the thermal comfort and the energy savings that you'll experience. And we all know energy costs are going up dramatically. So that energy savings is going to start to be more and more part of our conversations. We were able to easily quote the 65% energy savings that Winthrop Center will provide, because the city of Boston actually requires what's called BERTO. That's building energy. Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to get the acronym right, but you have to report every year how much energy your building is consuming. So the data already exists in the City of Boston website. So we could take our model and we could compare it to other Class A buildings right in our own neighborhood and we could easily make that claim that this building will save 65% on your energy cost. I'm not going to go into all the attributes of passive house because I think most people on this call know what those are. But I want to talk a little bit more about what it means for our marketing and how we had to pivot and educate kind of corporate America. I think most tenants are very familiar now with LEED. They may not even know what it means, but they know if they're going into a building, it's a question they have to ask. So we had to spend quite a bit of time educating what passive house meant and why as a tenant you should care about it. And we stumbled upon ESG, which now is a pretty common language, but 2-3 years ago, it was just starting to surface. ESG is environmental, social, and governance. And this is where we were able to connect with tenants and say, look, if you're out on Wall Street saying that you're ESG, then how can your real estate not be part of that story? And Winthrop Center really provided the tenants with an opportunity to say, and we're in a building that espouses the same values as we espouse. So it went even beyond passive house. It went to what are we doing with transportation provisions? What are we doing with clean energy? What's our diversity and inclusion program? And what kind of workforce and what kind of health and safety are we providing for their employees? So passive house became part of this ESG story, and it really worked. You can see a quote here. Cambridge Associates was our first tenant. We went directly to the CEO and we basically said, you know, I don't know how you could go to any other building because you are telling your clients and you're saying that you're part of an environmentally sensitive building, you know, sensitive program. So therefore your real estate should be part of this. So you can see their quote, Winthrop Center's bold commitment to sustainability drove the firm's decision to move. So this story, this passive house, and this is the message I like to give to other developers, when the market demands it, then you're going to want to build it. And even though we all want to do the right thing, it really helps when it also aligns with what corporate America wants. And so we have 3 tenants now, McKinsey, Cambridge Associates, and a company called Internal Research and Management, all very high-end quality tenants. And we didn't sacrifice the traditional views that people expect in Class A. As you can see, the passive house facade is a beautiful facade. You can do a lot of architectural things with it. The plywood is not part of the architecture. That's where the crane ties were. So we're just working that out. You could see the exterior balconies that contribute to our well program. And now I would like to stop talking and entertain questions.
Let's dive into the question time. And the first one is Jeff. Jeff from Boston. Jeff, where'd you go?
Let me turn my video on here now. So
there you go.
Kathleen, that was great. I tell you, being, living in the Boston area, having something like this in our community, it's just very uplifting. So thank you. And I think it's a shout out to everybody involved. So my question is actually the below ground space, believe it or not, but was there any thought or are there any plans about how that might be repurposed for as commuter traffic in Boston gets reduced, I hope?
Yeah, I hope too. And prior to the pandemic, we were actually seeing that. A lot of people were foregoing their cars. Boston has, even though the MBTA kind of has a bad rap, we really do have a very good public transit station. So we actually had 5 levels of foundation parking at one time. We reduced it to 4. And then we further removed slabs so that they're 14 feet floor to ceiling height in the below grade. And that's important because, to your very point, that could be repurposed as a grocery store, as, you know, entertainment. You could even do, you know, storage warehousing. Because I agree with you, the car is not going to be around forever. I will say, when we met with Cambridge Associates, they said, great, you guys thought of everything. You know, you're very forward thinking, except you don't have a spot for flying cars. And people like thought the guy was joking, but Cambridge Associates is forefront leaders in things. And yeah, there will be flying cars, and we're so close to Logan Airport that last delivery mile, you can imagine, you know, maybe it's not going to be people, but I certainly can imagine packages being done that way. So long story short, I think any developer who is building parking the way we used to, Jeff, and you know, you probably remember those days where we barely got 8'6" for our parking garage. That's a big mistake. So I like the fact that we do have very high ceilings, and we can do something else with that below grade. Yeah, that is the biggest challenge. Someone just commented about FAA and flying cars. That is the biggest challenge. Can't even do drones in the city of Boston without all kinds of crazy permits from the FAA.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Jeff. And again, when we were in Chicago, there's still that one building that has the connection to the blimps that no longer, or you know, never made it to Chicago. So interesting to see some history as we move around in the world, as we get to being Jetson's technology. And again, I love how that plywood is the air barrier. I'm sure, you know, that's going to stick around for a very long time, right there, Kathy?
No, I hope not. If I could get the window washing equipment working, then we'll be able to replace the plywood.
Fair enough. Struggles of buildings, you know.
Yes.
All right, moving along, we have R. Onette from all the way up north, up in the Yukon. Annette, where are you hiding today?
I'm here. Thanks, Kathleen.
Right.
My question is related to the upper floors, but I really did like what you did on the lower floors and the mixed space and the pass-through passages and all the rest of it. But was it cost, or was it something technical that prevented you from getting the residential section of the tower block to be passive house compliance?
It was primarily technical. There were 2 things. We were afraid to get rid of gas. Although after we went through the design process, we eliminated gas fireplaces. I found a fantastic electric fireplace. We eliminated gas cooking, which was a big shift for my company, and we're doing induction cooking. So those were 2 bold moves that I'm excited about. But the primary reason we didn't do passive house on the residential is we needed to sell views. And the balancing act between glazing and solid wall to get your R values, it's a thing. You have to think about it. And this particular site where I left out the part where we had to change a state law because we cast a shadow on the Boston Common. We are up against the FAA ceiling. We spent a lot of time and effort to get the height in order to get the value in the luxury condominium world. And we couldn't take the chance to compromise the glazing. It was also our first venture into passive house. And like anything, you try to mitigate your risk. So we weren't sure we could bet the farm, where the office component felt a lot more comfortable to us. So that's kind of a long-winded answer. I think.
No, thanks. It's interesting to see what
in the next building, it will be a very different attitude, because I also think that we had to work kind of hard to find a glass company that would work with us. I think that has changed in the 4 years since we have gone through the building process. So the glazing companies are getting much better and much more
getting on board with the game. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Kathleen.
Thanks. I'll hold on to Peter's question.
John, Sean, can I just interject just real quick with a follow-up question? And so Kathleen, as you were making those decisions, or what year was that, right? I mean, this is
So
that's one of the things.
that was back in 2016,
Yeah, I think
2017. We started
that's really
construction in 2018 and it's 2022 and I'm not done.
Right.
You know,
I think that's really important context because
and when people shut down for COVID, the city only shut down for about 3 months. We lost the project for 6 months because I lost my financing. We didn't quite have financing. So there were a lot of things going on. But yeah, these decisions were back in 2016 when, you know, we're very lucky that we were able to pivot and use a lot of the good stuff we're doing. And now the world is kind of caught up to us and understands it.
Thank you.
And even to dive in that question again, it's great that we're diving in. So did you guys even do a PHP model on the residential just to see how far off you were, and then kind of looked at, okay, well, what the glazing would have been required to get there, so then at least you have the data for next time? Or did Stephen
I do not think we did. I do believe today, partly because of our project, if you went through the state process, you would have to do that. But no, I think we shied away from it very early on. And partly because we weren't 100% sure what we were getting into. And, you know, don't forget, I have a little video, which I decided not to show, but installing those triple glazed panels in the office at 1,500 pounds each. At Millennium Tower, I used a crawler crane. That's a little crane that you put on the floor above. We couldn't do that. We had to use a specialized, Greg Beach down in New York made a specialized monorail system just to install these panels. So you start coupling that kind of time factor and that complication of the curtain wall. And I think we were pretty clear, we're not, you know, we're not going down that path. Today, you would do that. You would definitely do that.
Oh, well,
I could add my video to the passive house.
Well, hold on, maybe to kick off the overtime, maybe we'll go there, because we love the technology and the techniques, and usually that's construction tech, but we can start the overtime with that little video, because again, as we, you know, do these really cool buildings, we're using different steps to get there. So hold on to that video, because
and I will say one of the things that doing passive house brought to me and my team was the push to innovate. So we had to innovate. They didn't start out with this monorail system. The curtain wall guy figured out when he got out there, like, holy crap, I'm doing this, like, and I'm getting 2 panels a day. When the monorail system was up, he went to 15 panels a day. So, you know, he pivoted, like, we got to do something different. So you know, and most of you know, being involved in construction, we can be very slow to take on new innovations.
No, absolutely. That's great. Okay. Mr. Peter Molnaro, you can come on and ask your question. You technically have 2. I'll let you go with 2 today.
Yeah, the 2. One was the floor to ceiling windows there in the office. Are they made of tempered glass, all 3 layers? And are the office balconies thermally broken from the main part of the building?
Okay, I don't know 100% if all of the glass is laminated. I know, you know, that when it's low to the ground, it has to be laminated. So it's either tempered or laminated. The balconies definitely are thermally broken, and that was a challenge. There were a couple of other areas where we really had a challenge with the thermal breaks. But I would say Socotech, our facade consultant, excellent kind of hands-on type firm. So they really helped, and they worked very well. Somebody had asked on the chat about the team. So they worked really well with Stephen Winters. And then we had WSP, who has a very strong environmental group as our mechanical engineers, and Handel as our design architect. And I think one thing I learned, you really need to get all of those consultants talking to each other from the very, very beginning. I noticed Rockwell was one of your sponsors. I bumped into one of the guys from Rockwell when we were doing the construction tour, and he's like, yeah, I must have did 50 million iterations of your windows versus walls to try to get the perfect balance between insulation and glazing. So they went through a lot of scenarios so that we could maximize the glass where we had views.
Yeah, it's very good. And yeah, it's a good. Have you adapted any materials at all, or did you stay to the specifications of the original proposal in new materials that are available now? Go ahead.
Well, you know, we ran out of, I shouldn't say ran out. We had some supply chain problems with some materials, so we had to be flexible. But they kind of, you know, it was really funny, like the Dow sealant and stuff you take for granted and you don't think about. Well, we can't get Dow. We're gonna have to switch to GE, and then oh, we got to test and make sure that's okay. So there was a lot of pivoting on the job, working with the team. But you know, I'm a pretty, I don't want to, I'm pretty contractor friendly, I guess I would say, and I will push my team to, you know, just because it isn't in the spec right as manual, why is it spec that way, and are we achieving the same results? So it was funny things though. It was things like insulation and the foil back, and okay, if we can't use the foil back, we still need that vapor barrier, and we got to come up with something else. So it was really things that we have taken for granted. You know, I expected the glass I bought from Australia for the ground floor that has no passive house principles to take forever, and yes, it is, but not, you know, not things like, you know, sealant and stuff.
Great stuff. Great questions, Peter. All right, Barbara.
Yep.
Your
Hi,
non-passive
thanks very
question.
much. Yep, good-o. The Earth Room, is it a Faraday cage? Now, Derek Coburn has popped in and said, yeah, that's a really common question because DC current emits less radio frequency noise. But was this a client request, or this is something you put into every big office building? And is it actually a Faraday cage?
It is a Faraday cage. It's composed of like a, not really lead, but more like a copper material.
Yeah.
And we teamed up early on with a professor over at MIT in the media arts lab, environmental lab, one of those groups. And he gave us a lot of the studies about how workers will perform better and what things allow us cognitively to do a better job. Fresh air came out very strong in those studies. And, you know, we all know that, but it's amazing because the office space we built in a 1980s building, you know, we put in all those carbon monoxide sensors and fresh air, and it really does make a difference. We put circadian lighting in our office, and I'm telling you, at 3 o'clock, I don't need a cup of coffee like I used to. So he brought to the forefront, and he like I said, we all kind of know it as designers and builders, but it's one thing and to then have a study from MIT that says it's the right thing to do. So he had mentioned that as we go forward and we're bombarded by technology, people are going to need a place where they can go and take a break. And we've set that room up with yoga mats and a chance to do your meditation and, you know, disappear for a while. So I'll let you know if it gets used.
So it's not just electromagnetic. Sorry. So was he saying that electromagnetic radiation has a constant effect on the brain and prevents you from relaxing or focusing?
No, he didn't. It wasn't presented in that way. It was presented more in how do you disconnect? How do you unconnect? And how do you get disciplined to do that? But no, he didn't comment, and we didn't ask him if we're all going to get brain cancer from doing that.
Thank you. Okay.
Great question, Barbara. I wanted to know about that room too. I was kind of cut off and really super excited about the sports simulator, but then you caught my eye with the Earth, and I was like, that's going to be a pretty cool room.
Doesn't it make you just want to come to work in that building?
Yes. Again, I'm jealous that for all of you that have had a chance to tour the building and been there. Again, it's, you know, again, the takeaway from FIA's conference is that Boston, Massachusetts is a pretty happening place for Passive House, and I got to get there to check it out. So it's really cool what you guys are up to. Brian Hicks, you're up. Good to see you in 2D version after experiencing the 4D version. Sorry, Brian, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay, good. Hi, good to see you. Love the project, Kathleen. Can you give a description of the project delivery team for the whole project? And also, what were your challenges of rolling out Passive House with all the extended team members who may not be familiar with it? And what were the ways you got everybody on board with the Passive House goals and principles?
Well, as I mentioned, I think it was really important early on to get everybody to understand we were trying to do this, to get themselves educated and to buy in. So the team was Handel Architects out of New York, who have done 90% of our buildings. So someone who's very familiar with us as developers. Vidaris, who has now become Socotec, who also has done at least our Boston buildings. And I've always been happy with them because, as I said, they're hands-on. I've worked with some other facade consultants that come up with some ideas and then say, good luck, contractor, figuring it out. But Socotec is on site. They were in the field. They babysit, the curtain wall application as it's going in. And I, as a developer, am also willing to pay for that kind of supervision and that kind of interaction. And it makes the difference in quality control because the contractor knows somebody's looking over their shoulder. Then we had WSP for the mechanical engineering, as well as our LEED certification, because we also have LEED, we have Park Smart, and we have WELL. So WSP brought those components. And then we have acoustical and lighting, and Suffolk Construction is our contractor. So Suffolk went and got certified. I have a very strong clerk of works. She went and got certified, and a very young project manager that works for me. She's only like 23, right out of high school. College. She went and got certified. So it was really nice to get people on the team certified in Passive House, both on the construction side and on the design side. I was most nervous about the MEP, because I really felt that if you don't understand Passive House, you're going to over design your mechanical, and I'm never going to get the benefit of that robust wall. But because WSP had that environmental component to their mechanical engineering side, that brought tremendous value and acceptance and belief that I kind of think engineers tend to over design. So that brought the discipline. And it's really funny because the tenants are coming into the building and they're bringing their own engineers, and you can tell they don't all have the knowledge base of what Passive House is all about. So I have to really look at their calculations because they will over design. So, that team and that ability to talk to each other really helped. And quite honestly, this wasn't like the designers were trying to sell the developer. The developer was saying, I want this. It's a top priority. We're all in. And that makes a difference too. If I hesitated, then I think people could have said, hey, it's really hard to get that curtain wall. Oh, it's going to add 6 months to the schedule. That was not what this was about. We're doing this. So. Right.
So does Millennium Partners project manage and cost manage all that in-house?
Yeah, that's my job.
Okay. No, because I'm familiar with where, like in typical corporate and typical CRE projects where you have the investor, the owner, then you have a CBRE or Cushman, and then you have a separate cost manager. And from my point of view, that could be really challenging to get all those people on board on Passive House, especially if cost managers aren't familiar, or the project manager that you're bringing on board from CBRE or Cushman isn't familiar. But I can see where, from your point of view, if all are in-house, all of those are in-house with Millennium Partners, then it really allows you to success, frankly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you just said. And I think the fact that we were the owner and the developer made a big difference. Because you're right, if it's just a consultant trying to push someone that way, or, you know, I think in the case of a lot of the higher ed universities, you know, they want to be very out in the front. So, you know, they're willing to take that leadership position too. But don't forget, this was a spec office building. That's a big step for developers to
Sure.
go without a tenant in hand. So you are gonna run into some challenges. Although in Massachusetts, we just rewrote our energy code and you have no choice. You will. It doesn't say you have to be passive house, but the only way to get to the code they wrote is to use passive house principles. So
Great.
that's going to become a, you know, I'm really proud of the state of Massachusetts for going out there and doing that. And a lot of people are just starting to digest what that means, but that's what it means. So any passive house professionals, there's going to be some work here. You know what I'm most excited about? Because construction costs are so expensive, we are going to have a slowdown and interest rates are crazy. So new development is going to slow down, no question. Retrofits. We also have penalties kicking in. So it's really going to be fun to reskin these buildings and put new energy management, because we have beautiful so-called Class A space here, but it's all like vintage 1980. So there's going to be some fun times doing that kind of work, I think.
And I think to your point, passive house can really be a differentiator in the market for those kinds of properties.
Absolutely. And tenants, as energy costs get more expensive, like right now, the fact that we save 65% energy is kind of like a ho-hum. As energy costs get more expensive, that's going to become part of the equation when tenants are out shopping.
But
Yeah, no, it's fine.
oh no, go for it, you ask.
I think the question that I'm curious, you were talking about a lot of cost increases, you know, towards the end of the project. Obviously, we've all experienced that around the world. In your particular project, as you were constructing, how much attention was put to waste management? So what I'm finding, I'm working with the developer closely, and we're starting to really be mindful about how much we order of any particular material, you know, quantifying it early, making sure that, you know, we're on top of, you know, sizes and cuts. And I mean, it's a little bit, I mean in residential, so it's a little bit different from doing a multi-story building. I mean, but at least on a larger team, you might have people that can specialize in something like that. Is that something that you did focus on?
We didn't, but I see where you're going, and there's really no reason why not. We have the technology. I mean, we went to lean construction, and that's helped a lot. And we do a lot of prefab. So those two things have helped manage waste, but we could take it further. I still see, for example, the drywall comes in like 9 or 12-foot sheets. So there's still a lot of drywall trimming. So think of the labor, you know, to clean that up and to get it down an elevator, you know, from a 62-story building, especially after the hoist is gone and now we have passenger cars and freight cars. So it's crazy if that drywall, we have BIM models. There's no reason why every piece of drywall can't be fit exactly to fit. So I would say we have come a long way, but there's still a lot of cuts being made on the finishes. Things like wood flooring, like I said, drywall. The studs seem to, you know, to be pretty much cut to size before they come out. But there's still way too much dumpsters being pulled off the project.
That's the thing that I'm sort of.
I want to get in with you. I want to invest in a company that helps do that. Because like, you know, we have all these BIM models and these Revit models, and they do take off. So there's really not an excuse anymore.
No, well, I'm just starting a Masters of Construction Management to specifically research into this topic, because it's something that I've really started to notice with the BIM quantities, and then the money we save in one part, we can then spend on, you know, more passive house stuff. And
So,
Yeah, I
you
can
know,
convince
it's
people.
definitely a point.
You convince people to sort of go, well, look, we've saved 20, $50,000 on foundations. Can we put some of that into the windows? Because we know the windows are going to be more expensive. And so then you can start sort of justifying, well, if I work a bit harder in this part, can I spend the money over here? And I've actually got the developer to really start to comprehend the trade-offs in this process. So we're looking at putting in a add-on to our BIM program that will actually start giving all the cut pieces for all the timber framing. And I said, well, if we could save just 10%, how much would be 10% on a project?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, we're spending maybe $100,000 on 4 townhouses for timber framing. That's Australian dollars, not US dollars, by the way. And so he said, well, we'd be saving $10,000. I said, well, what can $10,000 go to then? Yeah. And suddenly you're freeing up these pockets of money across the whole project that you can then go, well, we can insulate more, or we can do some extra glazing and maybe make those penthouses passive house. So maybe as you progress forward, it'd be really interesting to hear, the next project that you do, if you could implement some of these things, and could you shift some of the cost buckets from one part to another? Please keep me
I love it.
posted.
It's a really great idea, and I will probably steal some of those ideas to talk with John Fish, who's the owner of Suffolk Construction. He also has a kind of construction technology company, and they're always testing out new ideas. So that would be a great opportunity for him to explore.
Thank you.
Great question, Sebastian. I got so excited with the magazine that I forgot to kind of wrap up the first hour. So some of you may need to leave. We get it. We appreciate you showing up for today. We'll keep Kathleen on as long as we can fire with her with questions. And I know we're going to maybe pivot to a bit of a renovation and reskinning discussion in a second here. But again, the key word that we talked about a lot today, that Kathleen, you talked about, is pivoting. And so technically we're going to now pivot to the after hour. And by doing that, we are going to give you a big cheers, because it is great having developers and owners come in and talk about how you did it. So cheers to you. If anyone wants to unmute and give her a clap or a cheers, let's do it.
Cheers, Kathy.
Cheers.
Well done.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the work.
Thank you.
Really exciting.
I love the questions. I'm so glad people were engaged.
Oh, we got more for you. Don't go too far.
Okay.
So the next one again, we'll go back to Mr. PH Molnair from Tirana. Go ahead, Peter. You got a couple more. And I know that she talked about MEP. I saw your smile go from ear to ear when she talked about MEP. But go ahead with your questions and we'll go from there.
Yes, as the mechanical engineering technologist in the group, that's what I appreciate. The question is about, has the time to tap of domestic hot water been optimized in the whole building?
Oh.
I'll try to answer that. I'm not going to pretend to be the MEP whiz, but we have one central plant for both the residential and the office. So it's not, the consequence of that is the office people, there's no such thing as overtime HVAC for them. Because the plant is always running, so they get the benefit of the fact that we're a single plant. Unfortunately, we do have gas-fired boilers to heat the hot water. So that's a negative. I'm a little leery about the infrastructure of electric in the city of Boston, and I know we're going electric, but has anyone actually looked at the grid? So I'm concerned about that. We did make a commitment to be net zero, so we will be buying clean energy credits, but that's not really where we want to be. So I'm not sure what else we could have done with the domestic hot water to answer your question. It is a central system. It's not individual apartments. We have a central system with central loop. So, that at least it's centralized. It's not everybody with their own little hot water heaters.
Does it have a recirc system so there's always hot water readily available? Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yep. And it has to, something happens every 8 floors, like a loop. That's the extent I know what we're doing on the mechanical.
Yeah, it's been addressed, been taken care of. Is there any PV solar on top?
Any PVC what? Photovoltaic? No, the roof is only about a 28,000 square foot roof because the tower gets smaller. So it didn't really make economic sense. We're so-called PV ready, so we have some conduit there and we could do it. And the natural thing would be to do it for the hot water. We do collect the rainwater that comes on any of the roofs, and we recirculate that in a tank in the basement. We use that to flush the office toilets. So that's really low technology and not that expensive to do, but it wins. People people get that, they know what you're saying. So that's an easy, gee, we're saving water by doing that. So, but and I don't know what happened to, the solar glass panels. They never seem to take off, but you see all these glass buildings and I'm kind of sad that we weren't able to, as an industry, get those to be cost effective or,
Hey, we're getting there, again, baby steps, flying cars, solar paneled glass, it's on the board to get to the marketplace. So no, all good. And again, yeah, I'm sure the water, that was a lead point that was easy to obtain.
Yes.
Now, again, I don't know if my good friend Mark is here, but he always wants to know what about the bike racks? And given that Lloyd may still be here, about e-bikes and e-bike racks for the basement, and how many of those did you guys incorporate?
We have about 340 bike racks, and we have a commitment to do a survey every couple of years to see if there's a demand for more. And I like that. I like the idea that the developer is committing to the future, so as we go that way. I am pushing for one of the maintenance people to be trained as a bike technician, because it'd be really great to get your bike tuned up while it's sitting in the building, and you're upstairs working in your office. I have gotten the little toolkit to go down there with the bike racks, but I haven't quite found the technician, but I want that because I'm an avid cyclist.
Gotcha.
I think a big thing for us is that the bike racks are also throughout. So it's one thing when you're a regular visitor, where the inside racks are, and you almost kind of always have your spot. But we need a lot of, bike racks all around the site, so it's easy for people to get. I love your point about e-bike racks, because I haven't thought of that, and you're right, that's a different, you're not gonna be able to lift up and put on a rack. At least I can't get, I haven't bought an e-bike yet, but I want to. But I don't know how I'm going to get it on my bike rack. So that's a different story.
Yeah, no worries. I got to give Lloyd the plug because he wrote a really good book, and we should all be converting to e-bikes before we deal the e-cars. But that being said too, is then, for your bike rack area, then you got to provide some plugins for choosing e-bike.
And we have a lot of plugins for electrical vehicles. I mean, that's a given nowadays, and people, especially because we're a residential building, we will have a lot of electric vehicles.
Yeah. No.
Somebody had mentioned the bike service. I love that idea, because maybe what we could say is like, okay, Mondays and Fridays, we'll have a local bike shop on premises to do any bike repairs. So that's a great way to kind of ease into that bike technician that I want. So thank you for that idea. The guy from Australia wanted to know what glass I was talking about.
Yeah.
It's something called glass form. FORM. It's in Australia. It's late. I got to buy temp glass, but it is the largest piece ever of this prismatic type glass that they've built. So they had to remachine in order to make the glass as big as I wanted it. This is in the stick-built portion of the residential lobby, and we did this prismatic glass because as cars drive by, they turn a corner, and we didn't want their headlights in, but we didn't want to have to do like heavy drapery. So we wanted the transparency, but we wanted to diffuse the glass. So the architect spec'd this, and I guess I missed it that it was single source and it was the largest thing in the world. And anyway, it takes a long time to get.
Well, again, it definitely made a few of our friends that are joining us on Thursday morning to see what happened from their part of the world that are joining us today. So great stuff for that. We got a couple of questions. Let's dive into things. I see Rob and Derek. So Rob Hoskin, and again, Rob said a good comment that he knows, he appreciates that there's a lot of smart people in Massachusetts. So Rob, you still with us?
Yes, I am. I'm not on video, but
Okay.
yeah, I just wanted to ask what the thoughts were around resilience strategies for this project, storm and power outages and things like that. Just curious about that as we're heading into
Yeah,
an
it's a
era
thing.
where that's important.
No, it's a thing. And we didn't actually sign up to be a shelter, but we could be. One, because we're a passive house, therefore we're by nature going to be warmer or cooler than our neighbor, right? Even if there's no heat or cooling, the fact that the facade has provided that natural protection against the elements, we are somewhat resistant. We're terra firma, so unlike a lot of Boston, we're not filled in. So we're at 28 feet above sea level. So we're actually on a little bit of a hill in Boston. We do have emergency generators for life safety. We also have extra emergency generators that we put in for tenants. The tenants aren't asking for emergency generation like they used to. I think they're missing the climate resiliency thing. And they're thinking that, oh, all our data is up in the cloud, so we don't have to worry anymore about energy management, and power outages and stuff. But they do, because you can't operate your building on the life safety generator. But we do have these extra generators. So I could imagine if we had a big event, this building could be a shelter or a lifesaver for some folks. It could also, in a smaller event, mean that you could still come to work.
Very cool. There's a couple of notes here, Kathleen, about bike tune offerings in Boston.
Yep. Saw that. That's great.
And I had to put a note here. Pedalheads is actually a company that started in Vancouver, and now it teaches kids how to ride bikes all across North America. It's pretty amazing. So again, maybe that sometimes in the summer months, maybe that all that 14-foot height could be turned into some bike learning. Anyhow, I'm sure you could definitely hire one of the bike instructors to help tune the bikes in your building. So pretty cool.
Somebody else asked about the kind of the systems. We are also wired. We have a wire score system, and so we went with two things. We have Schneider Electric, who is doing our kind of smart building. And that is basically creating almost like one network for everything to run off of. And then we hired a company called DigiValet. And DigiValet is the app that's going to allow you to talk to all the building systems. So we have like a hotel system for your entry door called Ving. So Ving will then get on the network and talk to DigiValet, so you can use your app to open your front door. If your friend shows up and you want to say, okay, go ahead, I'll give you access to my front door. The parking, if you want to get your car authorized out of the garage, you just use this same automation system. So we are integrating all of those systems. That was a lot more money than I thought, lot more money. Also, you have to do your own digital antenna system in the building, in a building like this, because we're so high, we're out of satellite reach. So there is Wi-Fi throughout the building, including in the elevators. And in addition, there's just this fiber network that has to run up the building. But I didn't, I would say for developers that's easy to miss how much money that cost.
Yeah.
Derek, did you have any other questions in the tech?
Actually, do you, by the way, Kathleen, this is amazing. I love everything you've said, right down to the fact that you're an avid cyclist. So all the hot.
Not so avid mountain biker, but I'm trying.
No, it's funny. I mean, I live in Shenzhen, China, and they've got the mobikes here, and so they've been around for I don't know 6 years or something like that. And it's just kind of like it's like you feel like a kid. It like opens up your world again,
Yeah.
to have that much simple access. But the question is, do you attend Realcomm or Core Tech, any of those conferences about the real estate technology industry?
No, if I'm honest, no. I have a really hard time with real estate technology, like prop tech and all that. It's not my passion. I have to kind of force myself to want to understand. I know it's where the world is coming. And they mentioned my bio, I'm an adjunct professor. I'm pushing my students to go there. I think there's a lot of growth that the real estate industry needs to do and hasn't done well. But personally, I have a hard time with it. I'm not quite there for
I agree.
spending time at
And
conferences and stuff.
yeah, well, that's true too. But it's funny how, I mean, we've had so much success talking to builders and just saying, like, I bet you hate all this smart home stuff. Not the word I use, but they're like, yeah, it's terrible. And it's a big problem with product market fit. They have a real challenge with that, and they don't get it. They don't get the construction industry in particular, and definitely not the property management industry. And that's what I started in '88, running a big 50 building campus. So I kind of grew up in that world, and my paradigms are different. Yeah, and it was funny because when Jim and I were talking with the tech director of NEOM, the new line city,
Yep.
and Jim is amazing as far. It made me think of it because you were talking about the inside structure that you need to have for the wireless in order to
Right.
provide the cell phones and 3.6G, 5, 6G, et cetera. And it just changes so fast. The technology is rapidly changing. And so I kind of made a comment about it. And I said, the most important technology you can put in is conduit. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the roof, like the solar ready
Yeah.
roof. It's that little it seems low tech, but it enables you to change the entire foundation of your electrical system, whether it's, going from Cat 6 to something else or from Cat 6 to fiber, et cetera. So,
Yeah.
but anyway,
And we did what are they called? Smurf tubes. Yeah, so we do Smurf tubes from the, to get into each unit because we don't know, and I actually am disappointed that I'm still putting coax for TVs. Like, does anyone have a TV anymore? But
right.
yeah, we're in that in between time. Same thing with like phone jacks. Like, ooh, do I have to do like,
No, exactly. Yeah, phone jacks, I would say that's kind of done. Yeah, that was done
that's kind of done. But the new thing is, and this was kind of fun to do, is all the electrical outlets with USB, right? Your little USB charges right there. I don't know why we have to plug a wire into our phone. It should, like I know they have those ones you just place your phone on, but anyway, it is kind of common now. Of course, the outlets will have USB. Although there was some new thing about the USB thing was changing.
Yeah, USB from A. Yeah.
So like you say, it's changing so fast.
Yeah, future proofing is critical, especially when you do large projects like yours. I mean, I've seen many of them where you said you started the technology in 2016, and by the time you finish construction or you get ready for trim, it's like you're sitting there going, this is so much harder, and I could have been using this other thing because the technology changed that fast.
Yeah, and educating our industry, I think, is a challenge. We like you said, the product folks have to get us smarter if we're going to start incorporating it.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up with you, by the way. I'll DM you an email if we can chat.
Okay.
Yeah, Derek, I'll find the link we put in the very beginning with her. Yeah, it's one of those fun things is, either asking kids or asking any of you in your offices, who still has a fax machine, right? have we evolved or have we not evolved? But I know there's certain businesses that still need a fax machine. You're like, really? Like, you can't just scan it and send an email? It's always interesting. Sometimes we think we're further ahead and sometimes we're way behind, but well, I think it's that time, Kathleen, where we dive into retrofits. What are you up to in reskinning future buildings? Can you give us any little details of future projects you guys are involved, or is it all still hush hush?
No, I don't have anything on the drawing board. I know that we often look at converting office buildings to residential, which I think a lot of cities are looking at. We've been looking at that for a while. Anyone familiar with Boston knows that the Post Office Square project, they reskinned it while tenants were in the building. I think that's a phenomenal case study. They didn't reskin it with a robust enough facade, but you know, it's a sample of how it's done and how it can be done and not lose the complete cash flow of a building. So I think it's going to be really exciting. I think a lot of mechanical equipment is going to need to be brought up to codes anyway because of, you know, our requirement to get to carbon net zero. So there's just going to be a lot of opportunity to look at existing stock.
No, great stuff. Well, again, you can come back anytime. I mean, we're even probably a year from now, I'd love to have you come back just to see how the building is. So just on, I guess, on dates for when you spoke about, you have some people moving in, are the residential people moved in?
April 1, we're going to open the building April 1, and that'll be residential. Our first tenant comes in June. So I think if Passive House comes back to Boston next year, because the office component will still be leasing up, and that's where the Passive House is, it'd be great to do a tour of it completed. And we didn't even touch on metering, which I think is the next generation that a lot of developers don't understand, that you have to have really in-depth conversations with your mechanical team to understand how do you want to measure this. And we are going to be well, you have to measure it with Bordeaux, but then you're going to be asked by tenants to prove, you know, to prove out the metrics that we've been quoting. So we're deep into, you know, BTU meters, which, by the way, I hate. Why haven't we figured out a better way to, you know, to monitor heat and air conditioning? And you know, that whole metering and what does that mean and who's in charge of that? And that could be like, you can really screw that up.
No, 100%.
So we could, you know, we could talk about that a year from now as more and more people start to do these projects and realize where some of the challenges are and what I'll say the hidden costs are.
Gotcha. No, great stuff. Well, I think we're it for questions. And so again, we appreciate your time immensely. And again, the renderings, again, the rendering company that you use, boy, those look really slick. That made the presentation I just really pop with all of us wanting to be there in real life. Interesting on the glass. I know next time that John's got a better system, we'll see if he knows more about this particular glass company, but a lot of great details going on. Again, Zach had the opportunity to at least touch the building. So I'm jealous for all of you that have seen more than I have, but the renderings look great. So that being said, Zach, any final words from you?
No, just a big thank you. I mean, I've already said it, Kathy, but it's so exciting, this project. It's I think it helps us make the case for Passive House in all sorts of realms, because we can say, look, there's a $1.35 billion project that's incorporating Passive House for its office space, and you know, it's just it's a bellwether project, and we appreciate the leadership that all of you have brought to it to make it happen. It's really inspiring. So, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you everyone for listening and being so engaged. Appreciate it.
Well, again, I just think thanks for your patience. I mean, the fact that you were involved in this from so when was the first time that this was thrown on a dartboard on the company project list? You said 2016.
Really 2016 we were heavy into it, but 2015 we had to start formulating our RFP and you know, thinking about it and understanding what Passive House was all about.
And I mean, I know that there's buildings here in Vancouver and New York and everywhere that, you know, they're all now competing for the largest Passive House building. And, you know, again, we're years away from seeing them coming along. And again, to see different things come and go, but the willingness to persevere through it all is really exciting. So thank you for joining us. Thanks for inspiring us. And all right, everyone, back to wherever we are. If you're into your Wednesday evening or late Wednesday, or for some of you friends that are probably getting ready to have their second cup of coffee over across the pond, farewell. We will see you soon. Lots of good stuff going on. And I'm going to let Zach hit that end button, and we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.